Hi everyone, I'm Rita Cacas, and we're in a little meeting today to discuss Filipino American History Month here in the Washington, D.C. area. With me here are Genevieve Villamora and Ben Guzman. Let's just kind of welcome them and they'll talk a little bit about themselves.
Great, hi. Happy Filipino American History Month. October is a great time of year. So I appreciate having this conversation with both of you. I'm really excited actually to talk to you about Filipino American History Month. Again, my name is Ben Guzman, and I serve as the director for the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs here. So yeah, I've been in the district for about 20 years and continue to discover new things about it, particularly about the Filipino community here. So I'm excited to have this conversation, so thank you.
My name is Genevieve Villamora, and I am one of the co-owners of a small Filipino restaurant in Columbia Heights in DC called Bad Saint. I'm originally from Chicago, where I was raised in a very dynamic and large Filipino American community. But I have been in DC now for 26 years and was really excited when the opportunity presented itself. I was really excited to open a Filipino restaurant here in the District of Columbia.
So I'm Rita Cacas. I was born here in Washington, D.C. My father arrived in the Philippines in 1929. And for the past 30 years, I've been so interested in Filipino American history, specifically here in the Washington, D.C. area, because not much was written about the D.C. Filipinos. And so in 2009, I wrote this book, Filipinos in Washington, D.C. And it's over time, you know, I had interviewed a lot of DC Filipinos, the elders, and then when I retired from the federal government in 2014, I established a foundation that preserves the history of Filipinos here in Washington, D.C. It's called the Rita Cacas Foundation. So I have a question for Genevieve. So Genevieve, I love your restaurant, the Bad Saint. And so I always tell my friends, look, I'm 64 years old. I've been eating Filipino food all my life. You know, why is it all of a sudden Filipino food is so popular and so, you know, here in DC especially. Genevieve, talk about how you chose DC as your place to have your restaurant.
Sure. Well, you know, I've been living in DC for a long time, and this is actually my second career working in restaurants. My first career was working in the nonprofit community in Washington. So at a certain point in my life, I just realized that, you know, I'm not just passing through the city. Like, I love the city, and whatever I choose to do, I really want to do it here in this community. And so after kind of leaving my nonprofit work and starting to work in the restaurant industry, and then really falling in love with restaurants and realizing that I wanted to open my own, I didn't want to go to a new place where I didn't know people and I didn't have like a social connection, you know. It made so much sense to start the restaurant here just because I'd been living here for so long and all of my relationships, friendships, and connections were here in Washington. In terms of sort of the blooming of Filipino food, I really think it's actually something that has not happened overnight and has happened in successive waves, especially depending on where you are in the country. I feel like growing up, there were always community places that my family loved going to, not just restaurants, but like, you know, Filipino grocery stores and places that were really like a hub of the community, you know, where people would run into each other and share news. One restaurant that I grew up going to and that I know is frequented over the years by lots of Filipino American artists and activists in Chicago was Isla. On the north side where I grew up. And so I feel like, you know, Filipino restaurants have in a lot of ways like been hiding in plain sight. And it just, for me, what it felt like really was that the opportunities that came our way to Bad Saint were really because of so many people that went before us that were trying to spread the word and evangelize about Filipino food, like Romy Darotan and Amy Bessa in New York, like first with Central and in Soho, and then now continuing with Purple Yam, both in Brooklyn and in Manila. And just, you know, all these places across the country, both mom and pop restaurants and sort of like newer generation Filipino restaurants. I feel like it's just, you know, like a tide that lifts all boats, you know? So I think that it's really exciting just to see how popular it is becoming. But something that I often try to remember and that I try to remind and share with people is that, you know, food trends come and go, but our food is like, we're always going to love our food, you know, like it was always special to us. It will continue to be special to us. And of course, it's always nice to be recognized and appreciated both by our community and outside our community. But like, we know that we will all continue to love Filipino food no matter what the next food trend is.
It's not a trend for us.
Right. It's not a trend.
Right.
I will say, Genevieve, I think you're selling yourself short also. I mean, I think that especially here in the district, but also nationally, I mean, I think DC has a really big footprint in the terms of the evolution of Filipino food as kind of a national phenomenon. You know, I think your pedigree is right. I mean, all of those names that you've mentioned have really been part of, you know, those that have come before us, right? But then you've got folks like Nicole Ponseca in New York, and then shortly after, you know, she began to do things up there. You know, it moved down the Boston, Washington, D.C. corridor, and you and Patrice opened up your restaurants and made a big splash. And, you know, like getting awards and getting people in the door, just really were visible and, you know, just very recognizable ways that our cuisine was able to have a national impact. And so, you know, people felt it around the country. You know, all the places in California that have been there forever, you know, the places in Chicago, the newer places in other parts of the country. You know, I think, but I think you're right, though. The rising tide has lifted all boats.
Mm-hmm.